program is the Active Center.
Hey there.
So today we are opening a stack of notes that sits right at a really interesting intersection.
The White House and cultural history.
Exactly. We're looking at the 1980s, specifically the Ronald Reagan presidency and the formalization of Black History Month.
And I know where your head is at. You usually associate the 80s with, what, neon synthesizers?
Maybe Wall Street greed, yeah.
Right. But we've got these economic reports here about the Black middle class, and the data it's genuinely surprising.
It really is. We have Presidential Proclamation 5443.
And we have economic assessments that offer a very different rationale for things like the war on drugs than, what you might typically hear.
Totally different. So let's start with the official stuff.
Okay. February 24, 1986. Reagan signs Proclamation 5443. And this wasn't just some happy holiday memo. This was a moment of formal institutionalization.
Right. He gave it the full federal stamp of approval.
Yeah.
And in the text, he specifically calls on Americans to study the extraordinary accomplishments of Black Americans. He frames it as a time to recommit to liberty and justice for all.
And this is the pivot point.
It is.
Because what jumped out at me in these notes is how the administration connected that ideal of justice directly to their economic policies.
Which gets us into the heavy stuff, the war on drugs.
Exactly. Now, looking at these sources, the administration didn't just frame this as simple law and order. They actually had a very specific economic theory behind it.
The concept of crime as a hidden tax, right?
That's it. The argument in these documents isn't just moral, it's financial. They saw high crime rates in Black communities as a tax that was eroding property values.
So if you have high crime, you have business flight.
Exactly.
Which means if businesses leave, the jobs leave. And
the sales tax revenue just evaporates. It decimates the local tax base.
Right.
And here's the key stat. Black homeownership remained steady at about 44% during this era. So the administration's stated intent, at least according to these documents, was a kind of rescue mission to stabilize those neighborhoods. They argued they needed a safe environment so that Black families didn't lose their equity.
To protect the investment.
Yes.
And speaking of investments, when you look at the raw numbers from 81 to 89, it seems to correlate with an absolute explosion in Black wealth.
The statistics are staggering. We often talk about the Reagan Revolution broadly, but for the Black middle class, it was a really tangible surge.
So what are we talking about?
Okay, so the proportion of Black families earning over $35,000, it jumped from 15.7% to 21.2%.
And real per capita income went up about 16%. But the number that really stuck with me was the business growth. We aren't just talking about employees here.
No, we're talking about owners.
Yep.
A huge shift. The sources show Black-owned businesses increased by nearly 40%.
40%.
That's over 424,000 firms. And their receipts, they jumped 60% to nearly $20 billion.
That's not small potatoes. And by 88, 2.6 million more Black Americans had jobs compared to 1982.
Which put the estimated total purchasing power of the demographic at over $200 billion. That's a massive engine for the American GDP.
A huge engine. And you can't talk about that engine without talking about the icons who are driving the culture.
Right. This is where we see the rise of the athlete entrepreneur.
It's a crucial distinction. It wasn't just about being famous anymore.
It was about ownership.
Yes. Take Michael Jackson. He didn't just sing, he bought the Beatles catalog. By the end of the decade, his net worth was around $175 million.
Or Oprah. She negotiated actual ownership of her show in '88.
Changed everything.
She went from being a host to a mogul worth over $54 million, just almost overnight.
And then there's Robert L. Johnson with BDT. He was building a company that would eventually be the first Black-controlled firm on the NYSE.
Its valuation hit $100 million in the 80s.
And of course, Michael Jordan. That Nike deal was generating over $100 million annually in sales.
These figures weren't just participating in the economy, they were defining it.
So we have this duality. On one hand, a formal proclamation and a war on drugs that the administration claimed was to save home values.
And on the other hand, you have this historic surge in wealth and business equity. It suggests the era is far more complex than we often give it credit for.
It leaves you with a lot to process.
It does, and it raises an important question for you to chew on. If the policies of the 1980s were genuinely framed by their architects as an economic rescue mission to protect Black property wealth, How does that intent complicate our modern understanding of that era's legacy?
That is the question.